Welcome to Ayurveda and Spirituality with your host, Alakananda Ma, a renowned Ayurvedic expert and a graduate of a top London medical school. She is the principal of Alundi Ayurveda Gurukula, a unique apprenticeship-style school in Boulder, Colorado. She is a spiritual mother, teacher, flower essence maker, and storyteller. Join us as we uncover the timeless principles of Ayurveda, discover practical tips for enhancing vitality, and explore the deeper dimensions of spirituality that intertwine with the ancient science of life.
Namaste, everyone. Today we have quite an important topic. It's called Making Peace with Our Aspirations as we look into enlightenment in the age of the compassionate mother, as we leave behind us the two masculine ages, the age of the father, the age of the son, and come into the age of Aquarius, which is the age of the compassionate mother. Our focus changes from perfection to wholeness. So how do our aspirations and view of enlightenment develop? I'd like to begin with a beautiful quote from the great Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. He says, "When I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. I found it was difficult to change the world, so I tried to change my nation. When I found I couldn't change the nation, I began to focus on my town. I couldn't change the town, and as an older man, I tried to change my family. Now, as an old man, I realize the only thing I can change is myself. And suddenly I realized that if long ago I had changed myself, I could have made an impact on my family. My family and I could have made an impact on the town. Their impact could have changed the nation, and I could indeed have changed the world. Start small, start humble. That seemed to be the message from Rabbi Salanter. So for so many centuries, we have been fixed on perfectionism, the idea that we could or should be able to attain some kind of perfection. What is enlightenment? Is it not leaving behind all those annoying things about ourselves and becoming so perfect that we'll be completely invulnerable? What really is attainment? And let's hear from Trungpa Rinpoche in The Myth of Freedom. He says, as long as we follow a spiritual approach promising salvation, miracles, liberation, then we are bound by the golden chain of spirituality. Such a chain might be beautiful to wear, with its inlaid jewels and intricate carvings, but nevertheless, it imprisons us. People think they can wear the golden chain for decoration without being imprisoned by it, but they're deceiving themselves. As long as one's approach to spirituality is based upon enriching ego, that it is spiritual materialism, a suicidal process rather than a creative one. Spiritual materialism, wanting enlightenment for me. Go back to the quote. All the promises we have heard are pure seduction. We expect the teachings to solve all our problems. We expect to be provided with magical means to deal with our depressions, our aggressions, our sexual hang-ups. But to our surprise, we begin to realize that this is not going to happen. It is very disappointing to realize that we must work on ourselves and our suffering rather than depend on a savior or the magical power of yogic techniques. It's disappointing to realize that we have to give up our expectations rather than build on the basis of our preconceptions. We must allow ourselves to be disappointed, which means the surrendering of meanness, my achievement. We would like to watch ourselves attain enlightenment, watch our disciples celebrating, worshipping, throwing flowers at us, with miracles and earthquakes occurring and gods and angels singing and so forth. This never happens, Trungpa says. He goes on. The attainment of enlightenment from the ego's point of view is extreme death, the death of self, the death of me and mine, the death of the watcher. It is the ultimate and final disappointment. Treading the spiritual path is painful. It is a constant unmasking, peeling off layer after layer of masks. It involves insult after insult. End quote from Trungpa Rinpoche, The Myth of Freedom and the Way of Meditation. That quote, when I read it in the mid or early 80s, impressed me so deeply that I have not forgotten it. And though I had to look it up to quote it to you word for word, I basically had remembered it pretty much by heart. Yeah, there is no magic moment where I am now enlightened. And watch out for all those people, and they are many, who tell you how enlightened they are, because it just goes to prove that they aren't. So, since the path is painful and is a constant unmasking and peeling off layer after layer of masks and involves insult after insult, and we can never watch ourselves attain enlightenment, should we just give up? Let's spend a few moments thinking about Tibet's great yogi, Milarepa. His top disciple was named Gampopa. Gampopa is the one who held his lineage. So Gampopa has been meditating on his own in a cave and going back and forth to see Milarepa. Finally, he completes his training and is ready to leave his master. So Milarepa places his feet on Gampopa's head in blessing. Gampopa says, final instructions, and Milarepa says, what is needed is more effort, not more teaching. Gampopa left. And suddenly, as he crossed the stream, Milarepa calls him back. I have one very profound secret instruction, Milarepa says. And he turns around, he bends over, pulls up his robe, displaying his calloused buttocks from so many years of sitting in meditation on the bare, hard rock. This is my final instruction, heart son. Do it. So, having given up the idea that I am going to become perfect, not have any problems anymore, become so enlightened, and everyone's going to see that I am really enlightened, and then I'll never feel wrong again. We don't give up because we take to heart the calloused buttock of Milarepa. Just keep going. This actually happened to me. I had a dream. The Trungpa Rinpoche appeared to me in a dream. It was after I had donated my book Pilgrimage to the Mother to the library at the Shambhala Center in Boulder. And vacuuming. At that time, Salanter was on retreat, and he had a work study for vacuuming the Shambhala Center. So while he was on his retreat, I went once a week and vacuumed. So in the dream, I'm vacuuming, and Trungpa Rinpoche, who had died quite some time before, appears, and he says, I've read your book. He said, it's a great book. You've had so many wonderful experiences. He says, just keep going or it'll all be wasted. That was his message to me. Just keep going. And then I had another experience a couple decade or so later. We were hanging out with an absolutely wonderful young Kempo. That's a like pretty highly schooled and attained Tibetan teacher. And I share with him a wonderful dream I had, and he said, "That's a very good dream. Just keep it up." That's always been the message. Just keep going. Just do it. This message was further reinforced when I went through my menopause, which included going through hypothyroid. At that time, I went through this extraordinary experience of flatness. And every time I sat down to meditate, all that was happening was this flatness and this excruciating brown boredom. Not the cool boredom that Trungpa Rinpoche talks about. There was nothing cool about this boredom. It was an irritating, brown, squirmy boredom. Nobody would want to sit and go through that, but I did. I went on sitting every morning and every evening, putting up with it, putting up with it, and putting up with it. In the end, I had a chance to meet with a great master of the Dzogchen lineage, along with 200 other people in the Boulder Shambhala Center. And I said to him, since I went through my menopause, something's wrong. My pranas are not balanced. And he kind of chuckled, like, "Oh, that's never happened to me." In other words, I honestly thought I was the only person in that room whose pranas weren't balanced. And he's that he questioned me closely and he said, "Look, if your meditation really has deteriorated, as you say," actually, he wasn't sure it was true. He said, "then pray to the masters of the Dzogchen lineage and invoke them. And if all else fails, just remember, whatever you experience, the Dzogchen, the great perfection, is always within you." So we've got to just keep going. And what are the tools we use? Another of my great guides in my life has been the Holy Rule of St. Benedict, which I lived under in my year and a half in the Abbey, Holy Cross Abbey at Steep Hill. So St. Benedict talks about the tools of the holy craft. And here's what he says. Listen readily to holy reading and devote yourself often to prayer. Every day, with tears and sighs, confess your past sins to God in prayer and change from these evil ways in the future. Do not gratify the promptings of the flesh. Hate the urgings of self-will. Obey the orders of the abbot unreservedly, even if their own conduct, God forbid, be at odds with what they say. Remember the teachings of the Lord. Do what they say, not what they do. So practical, St. Benedict, realizing that not every abbot was really going to be a holy abbot, actually. Keep going from the Holy Rule. Do not aspire to be called holy before you really are, but first be holy, that you may more truly be called so. Live by God's commandments every day. Treasure chastity. Harbor neither hatred nor jealousy of anyone. Do nothing out of envy. Do not love quarreling. Shun arrogance. Respect the elders and love the young. Pray for your enemies out of love of Christ. And if you have a dispute with someone, make peace with them before the sun goes down. And finally, in case you can't do all of those things, in fact, and finally, never lose hope in God's mercy. These, then, are the tools of the spiritual craft, he says. When we have used them without ceasing day and night and have returned them on Judgment Day, our wages will be the reward the Lord has promised. What the eye has not seen nor the ear heard, God has prepared for those who love him, and the workshop, where we are to toil faithfully at all these tasks, is the enclosure of the monastery and stability in the community. So stay in your place, stay in your chosen place, and do your best to use these tools of the spiritual craft, but most of all, never lose hope in God's mercy. So St. Benedict has always been one of my great guides. Another very important guide for me throughout my life has been the Abbé de Caussade with his wonderful book, L'Abandon, Self-Abandonment to Divine Providence. And this is a book that really sows the seeds of a humble path, a simple path where we do not go after perfection, where we do not practice perfectionism, where we do not practice spiritual materialism, where we simply stay right where we are in this state of abandonment. And here's a passage that I love. I should, before I read this passage, if you could see my copy of Self-Abandonment to Divine Providence, which goes back to the time before I had given up underlining books, you'll see how I have underlined this section and other cherished sections of this book to read them over and over again, to memorize them, to hold them close to me, because this is the path that I walk. Quote, "There is a time when the soul lives in God, and a time when God lives in the soul. What is appropriate to one state is inconsistent with the other. When God lives in the soul, it ought to abandon itself entirely to his providence. When the soul lives in God, it is obliged to procure for itself carefully and very regularly every means it can devise by which to arrive at the divine union. The whole procedure is marked out, the readings, the examinations, the resolutions, the guide is always at hand, and everything is by rule, even the hours for conversation. But when God lives in the soul, it has nothing left of self, but only that which the spirit which actuates it imparts to it at each moment. Nothing is provided for the future. No road is marked out. Often enough it is even deprived of a regular director, for God allows no other support than that which he gives it himself. Its dwelling is in darkness, forgetfulness, abandonment, death, and nothingness. See how absolutely aligned this is with what Trungpa Rinpoche said about real enlightenment. Continuing the quote, "Everything that others discover with great difficulty, this soul finds in abandonment. And what they guard with care in order to be able to find it again, this soul receives at the moment there is occasion for it, and afterwards relinquishes, so as to admit nothing but exactly what God desires it to have, in order to live by him alone." The former soul, that's the soul who's when the soul lives in God and you've got the carefully marked out path, the former soul undertakes an infinity of good works for the glory of God. The latter, that's those of us, myself and others, on the path of abandonment, are often cast aside in a corner of the world like a bit of broken crockery, apparently of no use to anyone. There, this soul, forsaken by creatures, but in the enjoyment of God by a very real, true, and active love does not attempt anything by its own impulse. It only knows it has to abandon itself and remain in the hands of God to be used by him as he pleases. And I love the next bit. Often it is ignorant. This is the soul who's living this part of l'abandon, abandonment. Often it is ignorant of its use, but God knows well. The world thinks it is useless, and appearances give color to this judgment, but nevertheless, it is very certain that in mysterious ways and by unknown channels, it spreads abroad an infinite amount of grace on persons who often have no idea of it, and of whom it never thinks. Here I am ending that quote. Oh, here we go. There's more. But I love that. I love that bit. I just love that bit because we have the aspirations. We have the aspiration to benefit all beings of the three times. Just little me, how am I supposed to do that? It is such a relief at the close of every day to know that in mysterious ways and by unknown channels, an infinite amount of grace has been spread forth by me merely existing in this state of abandonment. Often they do, going on with the quote, often they do not perceive the outflow of this virtue and even contribute nothing by cooperation. It's like a hidden bomb, the perfume of which is exhaled without being recognized, which knows not its own virtue. Again, such an incredible relief that simply by being in this state of abandonment, humility, littleness, great benefit is being performed even though we don't know it. Continuing to the quote. In the state of abandonment, the only rule is the duty of the present moment. I love it. I just love this. The only rule is the duty of the present moment. In this, the soul is light as a feather, liquid as water, simple as a child, active as a ball, in receiving and following all the inspirations of grace. Such souls have no more consistence and rigidity than molten metal. As this takes any form according to the mold in which it is poured, so these souls are pliant and easily receptive of any form God chooses to give them. Their disposition is like the atmosphere affected by every breeze or water which flows into a vessel of any shape and exactly fills every crevice. They are before God like a perfectly woven fabric with a clear surface, and neither think nor seek to know what God wants to write on that, because they have confidence in him. They abandon themselves to him, entirely absorbed by their duty. They think not of themselves, nor of what may be necessary for them, nor of how to obtain it. This is really, dear friends, a path of the wholeness and not the perfection. And it is so close to the Nishkama Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, the path that is given to the women and those of low caste and all the uneducated and disenfranchised people. It's a path of simplicity, not of me and I, not of spiritual materialism, not of me getting more and more perfect. It is a path of simplicity. And so that as I was thinking about how to prepare this talk, I realized that there has to be a very special guide for this time of transitioning away from the 4,000 years of masculine ages to the age of the compassionate mother, and away from the pursuit of perfectionism and into the pursuit instead of a path of wholeness. The perfection is like the apples on the supermarket shelf, not a single blemish. The wholeness is the apples that will be used to make cider, and you can't make the cider without the bruises and blemishes in the apples, and you just throw the whole lot in. So there really is such a person, the little flower, Thérèse of Lisieux, who lived only from 1873 to 1897. She was a French Carmelite nun. She got special permission from the Pope and the Bishop to enter the Carmel at only 15 years old. She probably sensed that she had only a few years more to live. She lived only to be 24. And yet, she has been declared the greatest saint of modern times. There is a statue of her holding roses near the entrance of every Catholic church you will ever go into. When I was preparing to enter the Abbey, so this would have been in about 1977, I believe, or 78, one of the ways I prepared myself to go into a Cistercian abbey was to go make a retreat at the Cistercian abbey that was then in Leicestershire. And I was assigned a director to guide me in my retreat and in my inquiries. I stayed in the guest house. I met with the director. He spoke to me about Thérèse of Lisieux, but I had already, long before, fallen in love with her. I took Thérèse as my confirmation name when I was 17 and entering the Catholic Church. He said, I don't mind that Teresa of Avila is a doctor of the church, but the little flower, they should make her a doctor of the church. Well, 20 years later, his words came true when Therese was declared in 1997 a doctor of the church. Few women have received that honor because, well, women, there's only women. But what is her teaching? Jesus does not demand great actions from us, but simply surrender and gratitude. Perhaps she had come upon the teachings of Jean-Pierre de Caussade, who I've been reading from. But Joseph Smith says, she does make it clear that holiness is within the reach of anyone willing to do God's will in love at each successive moment as life unfolds, surrendering herself into God's providence. So this being, a woman, one who is young, one who was canonized early in the 20th century. She is the doctor, the teacher, the guide who ushers in the new path, the path of wholeness, the path of the era of the compassionate mother. In her statue at the entrance to her basilica in Lisieux, she holds a book, and the book has the words Omen Novum, a new omen, a new sign, a new message. Yes, the message for the age of Aquarius. And the great Pope Pius Pope Pius XI, I'm sorry, declared her spiritual way of childhood as Omen Novum in 1925. He says, quote, Therese fascinates the world today by the magic of her example, an example of holiness that everyone can and should follow. Because everyone must enter this small way, a way of a golden simplicity, childish only by its name. In this way of spiritual childhood, all purity, clarity of mind and heart, irresistible love of goodness, truth, and sincerity, and this virtue of spiritual childhood, which resides in the will of the soul, bears the most beautiful fruit, love, O path, so beautiful, so good, so beneficent, all peace and holiness. Omen Novum. These great saintly beings recognized that a new path was born. In the writings of a woman who died so young, so she was always and will forever be a young person, as well as a woman, and who ushers in the spirituality of the age of Aquarius, the spirituality of the age of the water carrier, of the age of the compassionate mother, where we no longer embrace perfectionism, where we no longer want to see me getting enlightened, where we no longer care if we are enlightened or not, because what matters is to receive the moment. Just receive the moment. The moment. Right now, you're where you are, whether you're driving in your car, doing some cooking, whatever you're doing while you're listening to this podcast, receive the moment. Because we can never be more enlightened than we are in the moment, because there is only this moment. At the time that Therese came into France, 19th century France, she was born into that long, dark shadow of Pisces that we have spoken about in many of our talks. The church was controlled by Jansenism, which is the belief in an angry, punitive God. That's the duality of Pisces, and perfectionism, that we could only be validated by being really good. But how are you going to be really good? I absolutely have that in me. I really want to be a good girl. And I know that however many times I will get up and say, I'm going to be a really good girl today, by the end of the day, I will not have been a good girl. It was a very, very rigid environment, Jansenism and Pelagianism. One's own self-effort, the grace of God was forgotten. And so Therese says, I am convinced that my message is really new. Jesus himself taught me this. It wasn't maybe newly new. It was the message that the Baal Shem Tov brought. It's the teaching that we can find in Bhagavad Gita, in the Nishkama Kama Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga. Whoever offers to me with devotion a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or even a little water. We see it in the life of Francis of Assisi. We see it in L'Abandon, self-abandonment to divine providence. But shimmering forth amid the long dark shadow of Pisces, it is also rerum novarum. It is also something really new. In the face of spiritual capitalism, spiritual materialism, I'm going to do it. Along comes Therese of Lisieux to teach us the little way. So John Paul II, when he proclaimed Therese of Lisieux as Doctor of the Church, said, "She has made the gospel shine appealingly in our time. She helped to heal the souls of the rigors and fears of Jansenism, which tended to stress God's justice rather than God's mercy. In God's mercy, she contemplated and adored all the divine perfections. In her own words, even his justice seems to me clothed in love." We have a book, The Story of a Soul. I highly recommend reading that book. But Therese didn't sit down and write a book. She was asked to write some memories and experiences, and she wrote them in a notebook. She was asked to write something for her sister. It was just some humble writing to be shared with one or two people, and it has become the path for the new time. One day, Mother Agnes asked her what was the exact nature of the way she desired to teach souls after her death. She said, "It is the way of spiritual childhood, the way of confidence and abandonment to God. I want to teach them the little means, which have proved so perfectly successful for myself. I want to tell them there is only one thing for us to do here below, to throw at Jesus' feet the flowers of little sacrifices, to win him through our caresses. That is the way in which I have taken hold of him. That is why I shall get such a good welcome." And she was asked more questions a few days later. She said, "It means that we acknowledge our nothingness, that we expect everything from the good Lord as a child expects everything from its father. It means to worry about nothing, not to build upon fortune. It means to remain little, seeking only to gather flowers, the flowers of sacrifice, and offer them to the good Lord for his pleasure. It means not to attribute to ourselves the virtues we practice, not to believe we are capable of anything, but to acknowledge there's the good Lord who has placed that treasure in the hand of his little child, that he may use it when he needs it, but it remains always God's own treasure." Finally, it means we must not be discouraged by our faults, for children fall frequently. Finally, it means we must not be discouraged by our faults, for children fall frequently. This and the self-abandonment to divine providence has been the basis for my spirituality. A way of littleness, doing little things, time and time and again, jumping up to get the salt when you're seated comfortably at the meal. Little moments that we offer, just as is taught in the Nishkama Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, just as is taught by the Baal Shem Tov, the immense importance of our tiny actions. Little drops of water, little grains of sand, make a mighty ocean and a pleasant land. Little acts of kindness, little deeds of love, make this earth a heaven like the one above.
Thank you for tuning in to Ayurveda and Spirituality with Alakananda Ma. We hope today's exploration has ignited a spark of curiosity and insight within you. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and share it with a friend. For more enlightening discussions and practical wisdom on Ayurveda and spirituality, subscribe and join our Facebook group, Alundi Ayurveda. To allow us to continue sharing valuable content, consider donating to Alundi Ashram. The links will be in the show notes. Until next time, may you walk the path of Ayurveda with grace and embrace the light of spiritual wisdom in your journey. Trayambakam yajamahe Sugandhim push